You might be wondering why I have a shovel with me. I'm not planning on fishing today. Just so you know, this isn't exactly a tool designed for fishing. You might try to club some or scoop them out of the river. We're going to be going on a treasure hunt, right? You guys remember when you were 8 years old? Does anybody remember when they were 8? Some of us, it's a little further back. Some of us, it's not quite as far. 8 years old. 8 years old, there was a garage sale that my mom was invited to by a lady in our church, a lady named Marlene. And I'm not usually one for yard sales. Any yard sale people here? Yard sale people? If you like yard sales, post something on the live feed, okay? If you like yard sales, yeah. I'm not a big yard sale person. I'll be driving down the road and Ashley will be like, oh, look, a yard sale. And it's kind of like I just pretend I don't see it and keep driving type thing. Because it's like trap. It's a trap, okay? That's what they are. And at 8 years old, I really wasn't a fan of yard sales. Usually because there wasn't a lot for me there. And we went to this one lady's yard sale by the name of Marlene, who was from our church. And, you know, my mom had agreed to help her clean up and those kinds of things. And I got there, and it was same old, you know. Nothing there that I was in. No video games, no trading cards, no toys. Just kind of a lot of older individual stuff. Somebody even had unique odors of the different kinds of perfumes that were worn and those kinds of things. Just not a lot for an 8-year-old boy. And so as I was, you know, just kind of meandering through the tables and looking at all this different stuff, something eventually caught my eye. And it was all this like gold and silvered colored things, like with these little gems. And some of them looked like birds, some of them looked like flowers, and it was like brooches and rings and pins and necklaces and all kinds of different jewelry. And as I began to look at that jewelry and how shiny it was, my eyes started to grow and I began to think, treasure, right? Treasure. You know, it was probably all fake because it was out there on that table, but in my 8-year-old mind, it was treasure. And this lady was kind enough to pack it all up and put it in like a plastic Walmart bag for me. And she like gave it to me. So I'm pretty sure it wasn't worth anything, but to me, it was worth everything. I started to think about all the different kinds of games I could play in my 8-year-old mind. It was treasure. And as treasure, it needed to be protected, right? So when I got it home, I had an old Hershey's Cocoa tin, like probably about this big, made of actual tin, not like that cardboard stuff that you see now. And you screwed off the top, and I put all of that treasure inside that little tin. And then I went out to the shed, and I found me a shovel with a round nose on it instead of a square nose. And I found that, and I went out to the dirt hill in our backyard, about 100 paces. And then, of course, you know what I did next. I started digging. And as an 8-year-old, let me tell you what, I could dig. I was an expert digger. In the winter, I would find the hills where the plow would come by and plow our church parking lot, and I would dig holes and caverns in those hills. I mean, you could fit like 8 to 12 people inside these caverns that I would dig in the snow. And in the summer, when there was no snow, I would like dig these big pits out in our backyard in the woods, and I would lay like dead trees over them, so like you could like crawl inside this like little hole in the woods. And it was like a fort. I was really good at digging. And so I got out to this dirt hill, and I dug and I dug and I dug and I dug, and I took this tin and I placed it in the bottom of the hole that I made, and then I buried it back over. But I'm not done yet, right? Because if you walk away at that point, you can forget where you bury the treasure. It happens. So I got a little piece of paper, and I started to draw a detailed map. I drew my road, I drew my house, I drew the fence around my mom's garden, I drew the shed where I got the shovel from, I drew the tree with the stand in it that my dad would practice shooting out of, and then I drew the dirt hills in the back. And on the dirt hill where the treasure was buried, I put an X. And then I started to think about, what if the bad guys find my map? What am I going to do then? And so I got really creative. I put an X on the other dirt hill, exactly like the one I put on the first dirt hill. And I thought to myself, I'm the only one who's going to know the difference. And then, to top it off, you can't like just draw a treasure map and keep it on you, right? Because you could get mugged. So I had to hide the treasure map. And I came up with the greatest hiding spot ever. I don't know if you guys remember like the little bikes, like the two-wheel bikes you used to ride. They used to have these like rubber handle grips on them that always broke. Like I twisted off my rubber handle grip, I rolled up that map, and I shoved it inside the pipe. And then I put that grip back on. It's like, perfect. Nobody would ever know. If they wanted to rob the treasure map, first of all, they couldn't see it. And if I got robbed on my bike, how would they ever know that the treasure map is in there? So this was like a perfect plan. And weeks, maybe a couple months went by. And, you know, there started to be this longing. Like, I want to see my treasure. You know, kind of like Scrooge McDuck in his money bin. I wanted to go look at my treasure. I wanted to just like bask in the glory of my treasure. So I went out and I pulled that handle off my bike and I got up my map and I went to the shed and I got my shovel and then I counted my paces all the way back to the dirt hills. And then it happened. I couldn't remember which X was the real X. So I had to dig both. So I went to the first X and I dug and I dug and I dug and I dug and I dug. No treasure. So I went to the second X and I dug and I dug and I dug and I dug and I dug. No treasure. Guys, I hid my treasure so well that even I couldn't find it. Right? That's kind of a problem if you want to find your treasure. But you know, I'm not 8 anymore. I don't dig holes and, you know, bury Hershey tin cans of fake jewelry anymore. But although I'm not 8 anymore, I'm still searching for treasure. I'm still searching for things of value because you see, I've discovered a truth that Jesus taught in Matthew chapter 6, verse 19, where he says, do not store up for yourself treasures in heaven, or do not treasures on earth. That would be bad. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And the truth of that scripture, the truth that Jesus points out for us here is very simple, and it's this. We're all looking for treasure. We're all on a treasure hunt. We're all looking for things that bring meaning and value and purpose to our lives. In Matthew chapter 9, just a few passages later, we come across an account concerning the author of this book, the eyewitness Matthew, and how he came to be in the position of which he is known for today, a disciple of Jesus. Because reality is, Matthew didn't always follow Jesus. No, in fact, at one point in his life, Matthew was a tax collector. It was his job to collect taxes from the people who came by his booth, including his fellow Jews, in order to pay Caesar. And often the way that this would work is that the tax collector would pay his supervisors up front and then reimburse himself by collecting taxes from the people around him. And you know, that doesn't seem like a bad job, right? He's just doing what he's supposed to be doing. We have tax collectors today, and we pay our taxes today. And it doesn't seem like a terrible thing, but you have to understand the culture to know what Matthew went through. Tax collectors were hated in his culture. And they were hated for two reasons. First, because they were considered to be traitors to their own people, for being a support to the Roman government, of whom was oppressing the nation of Israel. So that was one strike against them. But the second, because tax collectors would often collect more taxes than what was required of themselves in order to make themselves more rich more quickly. They would be taking advantage of other people. And this is where Matthew is. He's sitting at his tax collector's booth. He's getting rich. He's taking money. And then there's this guy, Jesus, who comes along. And he says, hey, Matthew, follow me. And shockingly, Matthew, who's in search for treasure, who's like taking people's money, he gets up, he leaves everything, and he follows Jesus. And I don't know if we always understand how quite a big a deal this actually is. Because, you know, there's these disciples of Jesus by the names of Peter, James, and John, and they're like fishermen, right? And so when Jesus says, follow me, at some point, if they want to turn back, they always have fishing to go back to. That job's always going to be there. But for Matthew, if he leaves his tax collector's booth, he's done. There's no fallback plan for Matthew. He can't say, well, I'll try this Jesus thing for a while, and then if that doesn't work, I'm going to go back to collecting taxes. No, if he leaves, he's done. There's no fallback plan. No plan B, only plan A. It's Jesus or nothing. And one might ask, well, what would cause Matthew to make such a life-altering decision? What would cause him to leave a job position in which there was great opportunity to build wealth and gain treasure and become rich? I mean, who wouldn't want to have more money, right? Who of us wouldn't want to have more money? If I wrote a check out for $5,000 and I gave it to you, which one of you today is going to be and just tear that? We're not going to do that. Probably not. And I believe Matthew left because of what Jesus teaches in this passage. He says there are treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But then there are also treasures where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. Here's the truth, my friends. We're all on this treasure hunt. We're all searching for something of value, of meaning, and purpose. Here's the truth. There are different kinds of treasure. There are different kinds of treasure. There are treasures that last. There are treasures that are eternal, that can't be taken away. And then there are treasures that don't last. There are treasures that can be corrupted. Those whose value can be taken away. Any basketball players here this morning? Anybody play basketball, watch basketball? How about band, instruments? All right. Wrestlers, people, get down on the mat. Right? Okay, there's one. All right, good stuff. Yeah. When I was in 5th grade, I played basketball for my elementary school on a team. We were called the Hoops. And I practiced multiple times a week. And for a time, I gave up every Saturday morning to go play against other schools in our district-wide tournament. And at the end of the season, even though I rode the bench most of the time, we were undefeated. And, I didn't play a whole lot, but we were undefeated. There was times I got out on the floor, I scored a basket, I made a defensive play. There were times where we were undefeated. It's a team sport. And my dad was so excited for me that he went to the trophy store. I don't know where that is or if there is such a thing, but he went to the store and he bought a trophy with this gold basketball player up at the top. And these little gold basketballs on the side. And this little plate, and my school colors on this big tower that went up, and the basketball guy sat on top of it. And it had this little plaque on the bottom that said, 1995 undefeated season, Reese Puffer Hoops. And when he gave me that trophy, man, I was so proud of that trophy. I put it on my dresser in my room. When people came in, they would see it in a prominent spot. If somebody came over, like my grandma and grandpa, I'd take this trophy, I'd go up, and I'd show them. And that trophy was a reminder that I was a winner. It gave me a sense of value, a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. And a few years later, I started band. And like I was first chair saxophone. And I went to, the different solo ensemble competitions, and we won medals and those kinds of things. And, I was excited about those, and I put them in prominent places on my dresser as well. And then I started wrestling. And I won a few matches, and I got some medals and those kinds of things. I got my varsity letter, and I would put those in prominent places. And they were to say, look at me, I'm successful. I have meaning, I have purpose, I'm a winner. I could display those. Do you know what those things are today? Neither do I. I think my trophy actually broke. I think the basketball guy came off. So I threw it away. I don't know where any of my little medals are, type thing. And the point I'm trying to make is that often those things that we think make us successes in life or we value, they fade. They disappear. And hear me, don't get me wrong, because I love sports. I love wrestling. I love basketball. I can't wait when school sports can start up again and we can go and cheer on our teams. I'll be right there with my family cheering on our kids, and I'm excited for those things. But the things of this world and the things that tell us we're a success and that we deem as valuable in this world, they fade. And that's not because they're not important or they don't have meaning. It's because there's something of incomparably greater value that is eternal, that does last. And it's Jesus. And later on in my life, I discovered that. And Matthew discovered that. That's why he left his job. That's why he left his job, because the treasure he was seeking didn't bring him the satisfaction he was looking for. I mean, sure, he might have been tax collector of the year for 7 years running, but it wouldn't last. That wasn't the legacy that he wanted to leave as like the best tax collector in the area. He had probably seen and heard about Jesus and how he was going around and transforming lives, literally healing the sick and restoring the outcast. And he thought, man, that's big. That's something that's going to last. That's something I want to be a part of. And then here comes Jesus, and he says, hey, Matthew, come follow me. And Matthew is so excited about this that we read in verse 10 of chapter 9 that he throws a party. And the thing about this party is it's not a tax collector of the year party. It's not a, hey, look at me and all the treasure I've amassed kind of party. It's a party where he invites all of his buddies and a bunch of other disreputable people who wasn't good to be seen with, who wouldn't elevate him. He invites them to this party so they can know Jesus. He invites them so they can know Jesus. And here's the subtle shift that we begin to see in Matthew's life. Now he's pursuing the real treasure. Now he's pursuing the true treasure. Ultimately, Jesus and his plan for his life. He gets to be a part of the kingdom of God. The kingdom that will never spoil, the kingdom that will never perish, and the kingdom that will never fade. And when I think about the things that I deem as treasures in life, and the things that Scripture or Jesus deems as treasures in life, I'm faced with a question. And that question is, what do I value? What am I chasing? What is the treasure I'm pursuing? Does it have to do with, building up my own kingdom and making my own self great? Or does it have to do with investing in building God's kingdom? Because let's face it, my friends, it's easy to get caught up in building our own kingdoms. Am I alone in that? I don't think I am. It's easy to get caught up in making my life comfortable. And I know sometimes we're tempted to think, well, can't I do both? Can't I just kind of straddle the fence? And it's interesting what Jesus has to say about this in Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. He says, no one can serve two masters. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And all of a sudden, it becomes crystal clear why Matthew left his tax collector's booth. He couldn't do both. He couldn't do both. And it wasn't because he couldn't serve God and be a tax collector. I'm not anti-tax collector, okay? It wasn't because Matthew couldn't serve God and be a tax collector. No, it was because he served his money instead of his money serving God. Money was his master. And so he had to make a choice. A choice that often we're faced with. Who are we going to serve? Are we going to serve the kingdom of God? Are we going to serve our money? Which brings us kind of to our last truth that we're going to talk about today. See, we're all looking for treasure, every one of us. And there are different kinds of treasure. But if you look at what Jesus says after these couple of verses, he says this. Your treasure is a reflection of your heart. What you value is a reflection of your heart. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. This isn't Tim. This is Jesus. What we give ourselves to, including our money. It's not all about money, but it's certainly part of it. What we give ourselves to reveals what we're really about, who we really are. To the Jew, the heart represented the core of a person's being, the real inner person. And Jesus is saying that who we really are inside is intricately linked to what we value. And what is it that we often value most? Unfortunately, it's money. I remember going to a drive-in theater, summer 2003. You ever been to a drive-in theater? Like now we're like forced to go to drive-in theaters, right? Back in 2003, we like did it by choice. Now Corona season, you know, like that's the only theater you go to. But like in 2003, we were in the middle of Pennsylvania. And I was traveling for Kingswood University on a summer team, and my peers and I wanted to go see this drive-in movie, this epic movie that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, Pirates of the Caribbean, right? Dun, 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 dun. You know, you got that like massive theme song, like that incredibly powerful theme song, like going through your head type thing. And like I was just watching it the other night to just kind of brush up for the sermon today. And if you remember, we have Johnny Depp starring as the infamous Captain Jack Sparrow. And, you know, very early on, he's accused of being a horrible pirate. He doesn't have a ship. You know, doesn't have enough ammunition for his firearm. And he's got a compass that doesn't point north, right? What kind of pirate has a compass that doesn't point north? It's a broken compass. A broken compass is good for nothing. But it turns out as we follow the storyline, we learn that that compass doesn't point north because it points to what your heart desires most. It points to what you really want. And I'm watching that and I'm thinking to myself, and I'm like, how awesome would it be to have a compass like that, right? I mean, especially for me, I don't know the area really well, so I got to figure out where the donut shops are. And like, I could be like, I want a donut, right? And I just got to follow my compass. You know, it's the greatest thing in the world. It's like a pre-programmed GPS. It's amazing. You know, I'd be out on the lake in my boat fishing, you know, catching all these little fish, and I could be like, I want to catch the big one. And like, the compass would point me there, and I just like turn my motor and, you know, keep going until it started spinning. I'd be like, yes, this is awesome. Or I could be out hunting in the woods, and I'd be like, I want to shoot a really big deer, right? And all of a sudden, my compass starts pointing me in the direction that I need to go. It would be incredibly awesome if that were true. And as it turns out in this passage, Jesus is saying, if we want to know what we value most, what is really in our heart, follow the money. Follow the money, because the money functions like Jack's compass. You see, my friends, whenever we hear sermons or messages on money or stewardship, often our tendency is to maybe get a little uncomfortable, maybe get a little nervous. Sometimes, we say, oh, that church, they're just after our money. That pastor, he's just so greedy. We hide ourselves in those things sometimes, but listen, because I honestly believe this. We start talking about finances. We don't get nervous because we're talking about money. It's not really about money at all. We just think it is. We get nervous because we're actually talking about what's in our heart. That's why we get nervous. Because money often reveals what's really inside. So I just want to be clear. I'm not preaching, this message because, I need your money or the church needs your money. I mean, truth be known, it's all God's anyway, right? It all belongs to him anyway. He's God. He doesn't need anything. He's faithful. And he's going to build his church with or without us. No, why I'm preaching this message is because as Jesus talks about here, our treasure, what we value, is intricately connected to our heart. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And Jesus is interested in our hearts. He's interested in our hearts. He loves us. And nothing you or I could do will ever change that. He's never going to give up. He loves us. He'll never stop loving us. He loves us so much that he died for us. And he invites us to love him back. And when we do, when he has our heart, we can't help but give. Because he's our treasure. And where our treasure is, that's where our heart's going to be. I mean, think about it like this, in practical terms, right? I love my wife, right? I love my wife. Follow the money, right? I love my kids. I love my kids. Follow the money. Is it any different with Jesus? Should it be any different? Should our love for God be any less? We don't give because we have to. We give of our resources and our finances to God because we get to. Because we're compelled to. Because we love Jesus. And if we're giving for any other reason, it's the wrong reason. We love Jesus, we love his church, we love our community, and we want to see our community transformed and the people around us transformed. And Matthew figured that out. It's why he left his tax collector's booth. And it's why he threw that party. Because Jesus was inviting him to participate in the healing, in the restoration, in the redemption of the people around him. He was inviting him to something bigger that would last far longer and have more impact and reward than what he could ever achieve on his own as a tax collector. And that's what Jesus invites us to as well. Kindergarten. Anybody remember kindergarten? Post-kindergarten, or like pre-kindergarten? Sorry, not post. If we remember kindergarten, we should remember post-kindergarten. But pre-kindergarten. Can you remember pre-kindergarten? Like before you enter school, someone would say no, someone would say yes. We might have a memory or two. One of my memories was my mom talking to me about giving. Specifically about this concept called tithing. And she had like $1 laid out in dimes. Or maybe it was a dollar bill. I can't remember. It's a little fuzzy. And she said, Tim, for every dollar you get, God asks us that we would give back a portion to him. And like I use a dime as that baseline. So we give that back. And I'm not saying I'm perfect or I've done that perfectly, but I've made it a practice in my life. That when I'm blessed, I give that blessing right back to God. And I'll tell you what, I look back over the years and I see the churches and the camps and the missionaries and the children and the church plants and the students and all the lives that have been changed and transformed through the various churches and ministries that I've been able to partner with. And I don't regret giving a single dime. In fact, I remember one time early on in my marriage, Ashley and I were talking and I was doing some budgeting. And I said, Ashley, do you know how much money we would have if we didn't give to the church? And she looked back at me and said something like this. Do you realize how much we would lose? And I was like, wow. Wow. The church is the greatest investment that I've ever made and continue to make. And sometimes, people get uncomfortable with having these kinds of conversations. Ethan, I was talking to you this week, and you were asking me if I was uncomfortable, right? And I was like, no, I'm not uncomfortable. I love to talk about the subject of giving because I don't want folks to miss out. I don't want them to miss out on being a part of the kingdom, on being part of the blessing or receiving the blessing that God has to offer. So I'm happy to talk to people about this subject because of what the results are with partnering with God. And so this morning, I'm not here to preach to say, we need your money, I need your money, or make you feel guilty. I just simply want to say, you know what? This is something that we can be a part of. We can invest in. I want to invite you to give to the church. And you might be doing that already, and that's great. Keep doing it. But you might not be doing that. And if you're not, I would invite you to start. You don't have to jump into it right away. $10 a week, $5 a week, $25 a week. Start somewhere. And watch what God does in your hearts and lives and through your gift. Because it's not what you give, it's the attitude you give. You remember the parable about, or not the parable, but Jesus was sitting outside the temple and there was a guy that went in with a big bag of money and there was the widow that went in with like the 2 small coins. Right? And the widow, her 2 coins were worth more than the big bag of money because it was the attitude of her heart that she gave with. She gave her best. And that's what God is inviting us to be a part of. Whether that means you give $10 or $100 or you give to, the rescue mission with World Hope. Because in all of this, we get to participate in the building and the expanding of the kingdom of God. God doesn't care about our money. He cares about our heart. I want you to hear that this morning. Forget everything else I said and just understand this. God doesn't care about our money. He cares about our heart. But the two are connected. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Everyone's looking for treasure. There are different kinds of treasure. What kind of treasure are we after? Let's go after the one that lasts.